Brian, can I give you money and you write me a check so I can order something from this Abercrombie and Fitch catalog?
What do you want to order? Oh, wait, let me guess. Him.
He got you, Stewie.
It's Britney, bitch.
And the Iraq, everywhere like such as.
I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Out, Charlie! Out!
Our next door neighbors are foreign countries.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Remember Shuffle. My name is Ben. With me as always is my co-host Giordano.
Hello, wonderful to be here.
What voice is that?
That's a fancy guy.
Oh, okay.
I'm a fancy person.
And today we are joined by Colettte Shade, making her second appearance on Remember Shuffle. Say hi, Colettte.
Hi, everyone.
Very excited to have you on to discuss Abercrombie and Fitch. It is our first ever fashion episode, so we figured we would bring on an expert since Colettte has written copiously on fashion in her book Y2K. And I think this is interesting because you can tell a lot about a society by looking at its advertisements, because advertisements tell you about the aspirations that are obviously curated by companies. And Abercrombie and Fitch, since it's this weird postmodern lifestyle brand with these highly curated stores, a magalog, all these things together make it a fascinating lens through which to look at the 2000s.
Yeah, this was it, I think, for millennials in terms of the most recognizable part of our culture. Like, congratulations, everyone. This is the pinnacle of what we all wanted and what we executed our desires on. Like, on our hipsters episode, we talked about how the hipster was the countercultural figure of the decade. And this is the culture they were countering. Like, I don't think that a scene-stir or like a hipster would have been caught dead in Abercrombie and Fitch. And so I think it's like a very important thing for us to talk about on this show. And especially because like these brands are awful. Like it's all concocted in the minds of someone. And I think like really doesn't represent anything like true or real about American life other than maybe the fake aspirations that we have.
Maybe the worst parts of it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think what's interesting about A&F and why it's worth thinking about is because it was a tremendously successful retail company that consistently defied stock expectations. Like I remember my uncle, who was a middle-aged man who didn't give a fuck about teen culture, going on and on about what a wonderful company it was because it was delivering such wonderful returns in its stocks. And so this was a kind of persistent fascination in the business pages, but it was also a fascination among any American or Canadian person who was in a middle or a high school in the Y2K era, because it had this reputation as being the clothes in some contexts, which I'll get into later, but it generally had a reputation of being the clothes of the popular kids or the kids who were the most liked, the most attractive in the school, the most desirable. Although I will say that with a few caveats. But I think this reputation kind of made it a hated target. Like in middle school, a lot of my friends were more in the Hot Topic crowd, and we did not like the A&F kids, although then in 8th grade, I was kind of experimenting and drifted more into wanting to wear the clothes, if not embody the vibe.
Yeah, and you're totally right, Colettte, in that it is about the popular, the clique, the overwhelmingly white. And that's when you say like the worst aspirations, what they are selling, as we'll talk about later, you get to be an elite WASP fail son. That is the goal.
This is really the WASP fail son decade. I mean, we elected one as president and everyone was hoping to be one through what they wore.
So bibliographical note, the main source that we use is a book called The Abercrombie Age by Myles Ethan Lascity. I've only seen his name written. It's very academic. It's the product of a thesis that he wrote. We watched two big documentaries on Abercrombie and Fitch, White Hot on Netflix, and a BBC documentary called The Abercrombie Guys, The Dark Side of Cool. And we paged through a couple online issues of the actual A&F quarterly.
Yeah, and hopefully we can have Myles on one day. He did have a very thorough analysis of 2000s teen movies.
So let's talk about the history of this company, this storied company, pre-2000s. backgrounds. Abercrombie & Fitch was founded in 1892 by David T. Abercrombie as a store for outdoor sports like camping, fishing, hunting. And it's important to note that this was always a luxury store for elites. It outfitted Teddy Roosevelt for safaris. It sold clothes to a bunch of presidents, including President Taft, Harding, Hoover, Eisenhower.
And one side note about the Taft thing that I think is interesting, considering Abercrombie and Fitch's later preference for very slim and fit models, is, body positivity icon Taft. It's interesting that he also was a big Abercrombie guy.
Yep.
True.
Outfitted the pilots Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart, Ernest Hemingway, and Jordan's King Hussein. They sponsor all the most famous expeditions gone wrong.
Yeah, and one of the interviews I was watching did say that Hemingway did buy guns from Abercrombie and Fitch. So
Don't make the joke, Tornado. More on its elitist history. This is a store that helped promote a polo game between Yale and Princeton in 1929 with a gala. And throughout the 20th century, the point that I want to really hammer home here, it is a store that's geared towards the adult sports person, not cool, hip, sexy young people. They were never outfitting flapper girls or any counterculture that we had throughout the 20th century.
Right. This is for people going on safari, which is like a hilarious business segment to own. You're appealing to such a small demographic of people. And their store in Manhattan at the time was 12 floors. They had a pool on the roof for practicing your fishing cast with the poles that they had in there.
They were the original Bass Pro Shop.
Yes, exactly. But for people going on safari, it's Elephant Pro Shop or something. Some of the animals at the Museum of Natural History shot by a gun from Abercrombie and Fitch, I love the idea of the salesman being like, we've outfitted all of the biggest expeditions. Amelia Earhart, that other guy who went missing, President Roosevelt's Amazon catastrophe. That guy who froze to death in the Arctic, all of them wearing Abercrombie and Fitch.
Wasps really love to do safaris and exhibitions. They love to freeze to death in the early 20th century.
Yeah, that TR expedition where he went up the Amazon, if I recall correctly, I might need to do a fact check post hoc. That river that he went up was called the River of Doubt in Portuguese. That was its name. And that's like just so on the nose. I went up the River of Doubt, had a catastrophic expedition. So the sales peak in 68 at 28 million, chump change as we'll see. It fades into unpopularity. The neoliberalism happens. It gets liquidated in 77. It gets passed around a lot, but it's always still selling outdoorsy stuff or globes or what have you. Globes, boomerangs, taxidermied animals, weightlifting sets. It's still not the Abercrombie Fitch we know and love until 1987. Abercrombie & Fitch gets sold to the Limited. They are basically a rounding error, an infinitesimal part of the Limited's business. They're making $50 million in sales. And master of the mall, Lex Wessner.
Friend of the pod.
Epstein's first alleged mark is the architect of buying up this store. And you flash forward 5 years from 1987. It's 1992. It's been under the Limited for 5 years. And we enter another alleged sex criminal in the form of Mike Jeffries. And this is a guy who was a veteran of retail, experienced working in department and specialty stores. And he comes to Abercrombie & Fitch with a vision.
It's funny, as we'll see telling this story, basically anyone we name by name is an alleged sex criminal, like has either settled in court or is like currently in court. It is just wild that everyone attached to this story all the way down is like both a pedophile and someone who does sexual assault.
Allegedly.
It's all alleged. If I miss an alleged at some point, know that I mean it.
You're giving a blanket alleged for the entire program.
Can you do that? But yeah, so 1992 rolls around and this Mike Jeffries guy is put in charge. And this is really the center character of this entire story. Go look up what he looks like. He's an absolute freak. Yeah.
Not alleged.
I'm not alleging he's a freak. He is a freak.
He was an early pioneer of fillers, you could say, allegedly.
Yeah. And he increases, by the end of the 90s, sales from 150 million to over $1 billion. He had the vision and the management style that was very effective, that turned Abercrombie & Fitch into the story that it is today. You know, he has this idea to start in college towns and hire exclusively attractive people. We are not hiring cashiers and people who fold clothes. We are hiring models.
No uggos allowed.
Which I feel like is something that nightclubs and like restaurants do and other businesses, but maybe he brought into the retail space in like a novel manner.
He also has a huge impact on the actual brick and mortar stores. He has a vision for what the store should look like. There's a level of vertical integration and vibe curation that was his innovation. So they're meant to recall a club, right? We're young, we're hip, we're cool, we're sexy. Our stores are clubs. They have centralized playlists that play the loud dance music. They're dimly lit. They're filled with Abercrombie & Fitch's signature scent, and he does random drop-ins and check-ins to make sure his vision is being upheld for the stores. You stay on message, you stay on brand, as it were.
Yeah. And, you know, local store owners, they'd have to have ringers that they would like call to be ready when Mike Jeffries showed up, to be like, look at all the attractive people that we have here.
The head of marketing at the time, this guy named Craig Bromers, called it the most dramatic retail theater in the business. And that's what it was. It was theater that they were selling. And yes, employees were famously hired for their looks. So they were told to play the part of an Abercrombie teen. They were told what specific hairstyles were permitted. No piercings. They had to have only natural, quote unquote, looking hair and makeup.
Which, by the way, did not include dreadlocks.
Yeah, no dreadlocks at Abercrombie. And they want to make even this job, this like probably minimum wage job, into a status thing. They wanted everyone to know, the employees at their customers, that these people aren't there to fold clothes and make money. They're there to be eye candy, and they're there to be cool. And we've been dunking on Jeffries a lot, and we will continue to do so, but let's let the man speak for himself, shall we? Quote, "That's why we hire good-looking people in our stores. Because good-looking people attract other good-looking people, and we want to market to cool, good-looking people." Obfuscation level 0%.
You know, I think it's interesting that he takes over in 1992 because LFO, who writes that song Summer Girls, which I had never heard before.
You had never heard it? That was a big hit. I remember summer 1999. That was a huge hit. And actually, I remember my parents getting really pissed. I remember my dad being like, was this band paid by Abercrombie & Fitch to drop that name in the song?
My parents would have been like, ooh, we should buy some Abercrombie & Fitch. But yeah, when he talks about writing that song, Mr. LFO, he says that it was because in 1993, he like fell in love with a girl in Cape Cod who was wearing Abercrombie & Fitch. And so I think it's like indicative of the fact that it was like a year after Mike Jeffries took over, that he, you know, was already sort of having the intended effect that he wanted of sort of creating this almost like precursor to like an influencer marketing, right? Like an influencer marketing pre-social media or something.
At Cape Cod, no less. That's WASP Mecca right there. That's
yeah. So he's completely changed the thing that the company is trying to do. You know, he mentions that like their target demo when he comes in is like people who are 60 or 70 to death, right? If you're going on safari, you're not 18 years old. You're probably retired like President Roosevelt. But he comes in with this idea to appeal to younger shoppers and sort of speak to this ideal that we'll talk about in a second.
Because it's the early 90s. The oldest millennials are about to age into their prime buying years because of the baby boom echo. It's the next largest generational cohort. He knows who to sell to. So let's talk a little bit about the actual clothes, the aesthetics, what it looks like. So it's mostly just prep wear. It's mostly just preppy shit. It's jeans, corduroys, khakis, polos, button-down sweaters, t-shirts, cargo, and board shorts, tank tops, camisoles, swimsuits for warmer months, flip-flops, etc. Right? But it's the lifestyle brand that leads to so much success.
I think the Netflix documentary described it as like the sexuality of Calvin Klein meets the preppiness of Ralph Lauren. Right.
The brand identity is essentially Ralph Lauren, but we fuck.
That's perfect. And yeah, one like innovation such as it is that they add what the book called intentional distress to the clothes. So think torn jeans, faded t-shirts.
Again, I have to insert my parents' voices here to say, what? They're charging $49 for clothes with holes in them?
I need to correct you, Colettte. You need to quote everyone's parents. It's stuff that looks like it'd been washed or spent a long time in the laundry hamper. And again, quoting that book, it says it's youthful irreverence of the prep school look. And what I find fascinating is that it's not meant to look new. It's not meant to look like the wearer cared too much. We're coming in at the end of Gen X. Put succinctly, it's the preppy take on the grunge aesthetic of the early 90s. These two things seem like absolute opposites, preppy and grunge. But the message that you're sending as a wearer is one of privilege. I'm not trying too hard to take care of the clothing. I have the money, the background, the connections, the other capital, to the point that I can wear the torn up jeans and it doesn't have any knock-on social effects on me. We're going to talk more about this later when we talk about privilege frivolity.
Yeah, the idea is like, if you're preppy, you actually have to care about something to wear all these clothes. One of the coolest things I'd ever seen, I remember when I was like 14, I went to like one of these like summer camps, and this girl I had a crush on moved the hole in her jeans over her crotch to pee, like while squatting, and I thought it was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen in my life. But yeah, so there's a Salon article that gets written in 2006 where we have most of our quotes from Mike Jeffries, because he famously doesn't speak to the media much after that, because I think this one goes so poorly for him.
It's like when they let Peter Thiel speak for himself, truly, when they put a microphone in front of Mike Jeffries.
I think he's surrounded by people who agree with him all the time so much that when he's forced to speak to someone outside of that circle, no one is telling him how stupid everything that comes out of his mouth is.
He also just says the thing, you know, like he says the thing that is offensive and or legally compromising.
Exactly.
And also the unvarnished truth behind the company.
Oh, exactly.
Which is both offensive and legally compromising, yeah.
But when he's talking about like the mood of what he sees the Abercrombie and Fitch guy like in his head, he says that it's the best America has to offer. He's cool, he's beautiful, he's funny, he's masculine, he's optimistic, and he's certainly not cynical or moody. Two traits Mike finds wholly unattractive. A bit of a distance from the grunge aesthetic, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting that he hates cynicism. I feel like that's a very persistent trend in a sort of American right-wing ideology. This idea that any kind of critical thinking or cynicism, they might call it, is suspect.
I find most right-wingers to be incredibly cynical, though, right? Like, to them, welfare, that's for leeches, right? Like, they're being cynical about the viewpoint of someone who's on welfare or something.
I think what I'm saying is there's a fear of critical thinking. Like, I'm thinking about the Susan Sontag backlash when she told people to use critical thinking to understand why 9/11 happened. It's kind of this fear of the intellectual, this fear that critical thinking, it's not sexy, it's not attractive, it's un-American.
Just enjoy frolicking in a field with your boys who all look alike.
That's what America's all about. Hanging with the boys, naked.
Yeah.
It's really like one of our lifestyle brands that we have. You know, sometimes the clothes, it's not about the clothes. It's about the cultural association that comes with the clothes, which we'll talk about more in a second. But like all of this is an artifice. And what I mean by that is that, like we talk about on our Prestige episode, artifice means deception. And so the deception here is that there is this authentic, waspy, elite culture that exists, and they wear these clothes. And if I wear these clothes, I can be like them. And this is all concocted in the mind of Mike Jeffries, right? He has this vision of America. And, you know, Colettte, you and I have talked about this. I don't think it's ever like a society that he was ever a part of. It's probably a society that he always wanted to be a part of, but like couldn't because he wasn't born into it. It wasn't endowed with like any of the features that he would need. And so he spends his life sort of creating this like idealized vision of American life that he's always wanted to be a part of.
It just occurred to me that this is actually very similar to Trump in that they're both living in these highly aestheticized worlds full of yes men that they've created for themselves based on their own childhood insecurities and desires. For Trump, I think it's this fantasy that never really existed of what a titan of industry is like, what his home looks like, what his clothes look like, who he surrounds himself with, how he behaves. And I think for Jeffries, it's this sexy, virile, all-American college boy.
100%. They also both sell the idea that you can join their fantasy, right?
Yes.
Trump says you can become a titan of industry as well by doing my game show, by going to Trump University.
By eating a Trump steak.
By eating a Trump steak, you will be like my imagined titan of industry of which I am an avatar, and I also sell you the path. Similarly, Mike Jeffries' whole thing is you can join this fantasy of the fail son wasp by buying my clothes.
And so Jeffries has this vision of the America he so desperately wants to be a part of. And there was no one better at bringing to life what this vision should look like than photographer Bruce Weber. This is our third characters. We got Les Wexner, Mike Jeffries, and finally Bruce Weber. Yeah, Bruce Weber is a photographer. He had been working in the industry for a long time. He worked a lot with Calvin Klein, obviously, and Versace. A lot of black and white photos, very sexual. A lot of guys with their pants as low as possible, with the sex lines flared. And I think like Mike saw these photos and loved them and was like, yes, like this is the vision. I want this, but for younger college age children.
It's also worth adding, like, the thing with Bruce Weber is it's aesthetically, it's very statuesque. It's very neoclassical. I think Ben or Giordano noted it also is kind of in the line of Leni Riefenstahl, this highly sexualized, muscular kind of quote unquote Western body that's calling upon Greek statues.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. You look at his photographs, like even going back to the 80s, and they're very reminiscent of like a Greek statue, something you might see at the Met. The perfect human, commonly male form, idealized human form, like Leni Riefenstahl, or like classical Greece. I think he was sort of bringing that back. You know, like the Greeks as well, a bisexual man. I think he kind of saw that kind of beauty in the world in like a very similar way to the Greeks, or at least appreciated the way that they portrayed the male form. So you look at his models, 2% body fat, insane cheekbones. Him shooting in black and white was often a way to like make it seem like a little bit distanced from what it actually was, which was like hyper-sexualized. Because I think the idea is like, as sexualized as it was, the people in the photos wouldn't necessarily be expressing that to each other. Right? There are as much people in a canoe naked together, but they're not aware that there's anything sexually happening, right? You as the viewer might see that, but they aren't.
Yeah, it's almost kind of the joy of the peeping Tom, the voyeur.
I'm going to be a really dumb, obtuse guy for a second. How are you going to be a clothing company and show naked people? Show them in the clothes. Nudity is the opposite of what you should be doing.
It's a lifestyle brand. It's funny, like I was listening to some interviews with Bruce Weber and the way that people tell stories about him. One lady was talking to his photography assistant and they were like, how did you meet Bruce? And he was like, I was in a wrestling tournament and he was photographing me and I met him that way. And then a friend of Bruce's was like, oh yeah, I met him because he was photographing my son's water polo practice.
More red flags than a Soviet military parade. Good God.
I think that he specifically likes to find like male athletes, often non-models, like regular people who sort of bring like a certain authenticity with them into the shoot. I think he got to start shooting surfers, but he's like one of the first people to shoot surfers not in the water, but like on land. But Mike Jeffries sees his work and is like, yes, this is what I want. And so originally they only have the money to buy one photo to hang in the store. But like by the end of the decade, when Abercrombie & Fitch has money, I mean, Bruce Weber is the guy. He's doing all of their work.
And he's going to do the photographs for the magalogs that go out 4 times a year. And we're going to talk about those later.
Which, by the way, magalog has always sort of struck me as a cellar door type word.
That first syllable, though, has got some rough connotations nowadays.
Although maybe not for their target audience.
Yeah, certainly now. Yeah.
Half magazine, half catalog, if the listener couldn't put that together. But it's just sort of a collection of photographs from Bruce Weber. There's no prices, there's no call outs of specific clothing that are there. It's all just people sort of in various stage of undressing the Abercrombie and Fitch clothes. But yeah, you know, he's not the first person to use sex to sell clothing, but I think they certainly were the most shameless about it. In some ways.
I wonder if they were the first to target to such a young demographic. Like, sex to sell clothing in some form was not new in the Y2K era. I mean, I think you go back to the disco era, for example, like Fiorucci, a lot of these brands that were targeting basically young adults were explicitly or implicitly sexual, whether they were saying, oh, well, kind of transmitting with their ads, our clothes will help you get laid, or even having sexy and suggestive taglines in the ad. And of course, you also had Calvin Klein, which I believe were these ads in the late 80s, early 90s were also shot by Bruce Weber, which had people like Kate Moss, people earlier on like a teenage Brooke Shields who was saying nothing stands between me and my Calvins. So you did have this highly sexualized clothing advertising, but I think what was different about A&F was that this is targeting people in middle school and people in high school. I remember being 12, being 13, and being like, I am the target demographic for this. And they're selling t-shirts that have jokes about racism and group sex.
In 2002, they sold thongs for middle school girls that had eye candy and wink wink printed on the front.
Jesus.
And when Mike Jeffries was confronted with this in that Salon interview, he said, that was a bunch of bullshit. People said we were cynical, that we were sexualizing little girls. But you know what? I think that those are cute underwear for little girls. And I think anyone who gets on a bandwagon about thongs for little girls is crazy. Just crazy. There's so much craziness about sex in this country. It's nuts.
It makes me so upset. I really want to go on a flight to a faraway island in the Caribbean with one of my pals.
His next sentence is actually very telling because he says, I can see getting upset about letting your girl hang out with a bunch of old pervs, but why would you let your girl hang out with a bunch of old pervs? And it's like, who said anything? Wait, what was that last bit?
Where did the old pervs come from?
Who's doing that?
My Abercrombie & Fitch t-shirt is raising a lot of questions about things that are already answered by my Abercrombie & Fitch t-shirt.
Yeah. I love the way that he just expects that sentence, too, to, like, be an answer onto itself, where he's like, anyone who thinks about that is crazy. Just crazy. It's like, care to elaborate on, like, why they might be crazy? He chalks it up to, like, American puritanicalness, I guess, but it's like, I don't know, bro. Like, we're talking about underage people here.
The quarters of the quarterly were not the business cycle quarters. They were the school year quarters. It was called, like, back to school, spring break, summer break, and I forget what the fourth one was. But it's, like, entirely based around the academic calendar, which gives you plausible deniability.
Right. It could be the college. Yeah, they're over 18. But right, you could be middle school, you could be high school, reading these magalogs that had how-tos on group sex. And I believe, right? It's been a while since I've like tracked down some of the pages. I can't remember where. And I think there was something about doing a circle jerk. I might be wrong about that. Am I making that up? Did you guys find this too?
I definitely read that there were group sex advice columns.
Yes, okay, so that's what it was. Okay, something in that general realm. But right, it's like, this is targeted possibly toward underage people.
Listener, please raise money for Ben and I to travel to Duke University to look at their archive of the A&F Quarterly. That is not a joke. That is where the archive is.
That's amazing. Man, I really want to go to Duke now. I don't think I've ever sent that sentence in my life.
That's a college that was built on tobacco money. So they sold one vice and then spent their vice money collecting all the A&F quarterlies. That's a single tear rolls down my eye at the beauty.
I was thinking about it. Where else would it be? I mean, it's a preppy and athletic school. Where else would you keep the archives but at Duke?
I want to talk a little bit about this idea of it being a lifestyle brand, because Ben and I have stumbled onto the 2000s being this very like sort of postmodern decade in so many ways. From everything from like Family Guy to like The Prestige, you know, it always seems to come up. And I really do think that what Abercrombie & Fitch is offering you is a postmodern aesthetic. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that when you are buying Abercrombie clothes, it is not about the t-shirt and its like ability to be a t-shirt. It is about preconceived cultural connotations that come with the t-shirt, right? This is often what postmodern means, is like, oh, for Family Guy, it meant I have to know all these references to get it. For The Prestige, it's like I have to know how a story normally is structured to understand why this is interesting.
Either self-referentiality or just like referentiality to other established pieces of media are two tenets of postmodernism.
Right. You are buying into the preconceived notion of a lifestyle that comes with these clothes. And so, for example, like when you buy a fishing rod from the 1927 Abercrombie & Fitch, you are buying a fishing rod that is meant to do fishing.
You can test it out on the rooftop pool for its utility.
Right.
Does this thing do its teleological task of fishing?
But when you go into a Hollister, you crucially cannot buy any surfing equipment or anything that would actually help you surf in the surfing-based store. And I should quickly mention that Abercrombie & Fitch started Hollister in the year 2000. And so they're one and the same. And I think like the same is true for Abercrombie & Fitch, because as much as their imagery spoke to like canoeing and like camping, you can't actually buy any of that stuff there. You can't buy snowshoes, even though they might have them on the walls or whatever. And so talking about Hollister for a second, me in the year 2003, who owned Hollister shirts, had never been in the ocean, right? But like to me, if I buy this shirt, I can buy the cultural cachet that comes with being a surfer. I can buy into this preconceived cultural association with surfing. Even though it's completely, it's artifice. I'm not a surfer. You know what? Neither is Hollister.
But this reminds me of something Naomi Klein said in her 1999 book, No Logo, where she was talking about the rise of branding during the 90s and the Y2K era. And she talks about, for example, Nike. I believe she interviews a marketing executive at Nike who says that Nike is not about the basketball shoes, or it's not about the Air Jordans. It's not actually about the shorts and so on. It's about the quote idea of sports. And I think that this is very much in that vein. Like Nike was about the just general idea of sports, whether or not you actually played sports or used the clothing in a sporting way. Whereas Abercrombie & Fitch was about being a sexy young person who fucks and is popular. And then Hollister is about being a sexy young person who fucks, who's popular, who also surfs. But it's about these ideas. It's about these ideas that these brands have rather than any actual functional aspect of what their products do.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting when I talk about them being a postmodern brand, the way that they're able to like take in associations with other products. Like when I was reading the A&F Quarterly, it's written in the form of like a scrapbook where there's like a main character, and he talks about how he had just gotten like a Jeep for Christmas, right? And it's like that's making a cultural reference. So this is the type of person who wears Abercrombie, the type of person who gets a Jeep for Christmas, right?
If there is a function, it is that you can join their ranks by buying this thing.
If you buy A&F, maybe you too can also get a Jeep for Christmas. And then through that, you'll be able to participate in other ways.
That's funny that you mentioned about Nike, because it's like, at least you can play basketball in those shoes, even though like 99% of people who wear Air Jordans will never play basketball in them.
Well, you can have sex in those clothes.
You know what? Point made. I stand corrected. Or like all the car commercials that you see during football games where it's all like off-roading and it's like, go and find the trails that no one else will. And it's like, you're going to be stuck in traffic on the way to Myers. You're not going to be using the car for going off-roading. You're going to be using it to run over children in your baby-killing behemoth. So yeah, I just found doing a lot of research for this that artifice be very, very interesting. The idea that they can create a vision of someone you would like to be and then sell you clothes that you think they would wear. And like, I think when you're young, when you're a teenager, like you're very interested in like finding some kind of identity for yourself. And then someone says, hey, like if you wear these clothes, you're cool. You'll fit in. You'll be a part of this whole thing. See these beautiful people at the mall? See this guy who has a six-pack and is inviting you into the store? You can be like him. And what I find especially diabolical about Hollister is like, at least with Abercrombie & Fitch, there is a real reference. I remember always seeing that established 1892. And as a kid, I recall so vividly in my mind thinking like, wow, I can't believe they've been around since 1892. I just heard about them. There's a continuity here that goes back all the way to Teddy Roosevelt, right? And I'm part of that continuity. And what I find so funny about Hollister is at their store, it would say established 1927, in Hollister, California. And you imagine that there's like this long line of surfers that goes back like 100 years, and you're part of that continuity. And then you come to find out like for Hollister, this is just completely made up. They're not even bothering with the artifice in the same way as with Abercrombie & Fitch. They're just like, oh yeah, it's fucking, established 1927 or whatever. And it's like, no, this is just like established in the publicly traded boardroom somewhere, and everybody fell for it.
This is part of what also makes Hollister so postmodern, in that the facts don't really matter. It doesn't matter that it actually has no lineage beyond that boardroom and that it was started 2 years before. It doesn't matter. Just the signifiers. It's the signifiers alone that matter.
And it's funny that we crave authenticity so much, and yet it's just like we're willing to also just accept a made-up authenticity.
Well, but also think about how the clothes look, right? Like one of the things that I remember about the A&F t-shirts and the Hollister t-shirts is that they would all look super distressed. Like you had gotten this t-shirt, it would say like Abercrombie and Fitch, Rec League, established 1892 or something. And then maybe it would have like a cheeky and or racist statement on it, or maybe it wouldn't. But the text, it would usually be like this font that looked like it had been chipped away by being washed in the washing machine many times, but it was just the font.
I love when new restaurants do this. You go to some stupid hipster burger joint called like, I don't know, Bitch Burgers or something. The feminist burger joint. Come to Bitch Burgers. This is established 2019 in like one of the highest turnover industries of all time, restaurantation. And I'm like, you know what? I appreciate your optimism, but this is not that long ago, friend.
And postmodern wise too, I think it's interesting that like the logos are so much more prominently placed on these clothes, I think, than had been done before, right? Like logos have always been appreciated for like a brand association with quality or like for a certain maybe type of sexuality, but like the letters are gigantic on these clothes. Like it takes up so much more of the real estate than I think was traditional. And I find that to be very postmodern because the association is so much more clear to the audience. That book, The Age of Abercrombie, talked about how like there's a philosopher that thinks that everyone in everyday life is both performer and audience. And so when you wear that clothes, you are displaying to the world as a performer, not only a conception of who you think you are, but hoping that they see this brand and take this in as like a sign that you are a member of what this brand stands for.
And if the logo's really big, they'll be sure to see it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not the teeny tiny little Tommy Hilfiger flag anymore.
And Colettte, you and I like started talking about this topic because we were both fascinated at the idea that the vision that they were projecting to the world, I think, was one of like Yankee America, right? Of like WASP, old money, blonde, English. I think in the Magalog, that guy who got the Jeep for Christmas, he lived in Hamilton, Massachusetts.
Which, by the way, it's on the North Shore, and my husband's entire family lives on the North Shore of Boston, but they're all Jewish. So I feel like what's interesting is, Ben and Giordano, I was reading some of the research you had gathered about the vision for this fake scrapbook for this family in Hamilton, Massachusetts. And I feel like what's interesting is, yes, they are going for this WASP, long lineage, Yale attendee kind of vibe. But it sort of reads like somebody who doesn't have all the details because there are a couple of big misses. I mean, North Shore, definitely there are parts that are waspy, although I guess, and maybe just because of my personal connections there, I sort of see it more as like upper middle class, like Jewish and Italian. But then like, I thought it was interesting, like there was something in that Magalog about playing polo. And, you know, I'm not a WASP. I've had times in my life where I'm adjacent to them. So I feel like I have some insight there, at least in terms of observation. But I feel like polo, right? There was something in the Magalog about a polo match. I feel like at that time, polo was very much for like the international elite, like it had kind of fallen off as a WASP thing. I feel like at that time, if they really wanted to get it correct, they would have said lacrosse, they would have said squash.
Right. Crucially, it's because Mike Jeffries and Bruce Weber are not actually WASP. These are just people who idolize them. And so they end up getting probably like a lot of these details wrong because, as we discussed, Colettte, a lot of these guys, and including the Abercrombie & Fitch headquarters, are from the Midwest. The headquarters is in Ohio, folks. Notably, not the cool WASP cabin in the woods in New England.
Right. If they really wanted to make their headquarters feel WASP, they would have put it on like Islesboro, Maine or something, which is a very fancy but subdued Gilded Age era summering colony. They would have been in Dark Harbor, but I don't think the people there would have cottoned to a major publicly traded corporation being headquartered there. So it's in Ohio, but I just moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and everything in this town centers around the University of Michigan, which is a public Ivy. It's a top football school. I just went to my first ever football game. It was very cool. I was in a stadium full of 110,000 people wearing yellow maize, and we beat the University of Wisconsin. So that was cool. But I remember being there and thinking, this feels very Abercrombie and Fitch. And the vibe, my read of the vibe in and around the University of Michigan is it's certainly affluent. You know, it's like upper middle class kids from across the country and in many cases around the world. But it has this real feel of upper middle class, Midwestern, sporty. It's a public school, you know, it's not Yale, it's not Harvard. So there aren't any weird secret clubs where you have to get naked with your friends. Although I guess that is very much Abercrombie and Fitch's whole vision.
Yeah, they were trying to shoot the secret rituals. They were trying to do the Skull and Bone Society, but they didn't know all the details. So instead it's just like being naked in a canoe.
Yeah. I think my point is that there's something about Abercrombie and Fitch that always felt to me very middle class versus actually upper class. But I also see the vision with how it was kind of this outsider's vision of waspy world.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, I think that's very key because like Ralph Lauren, that might actually be for people for the upper middle class or whatever. But if you are a brand that is aimed at the middle class, I think you will crucially be aspirational. You'll posture as not middle class, obviously. And so that's part of the concoction that they have here. It is perfect for people from the Midwest who are middle class, who are aspirational in their class status.
That's a perfect transition. Let's move on to our class section since we've already started talking about it. So this is an idea that this book talked about a lot, the Abercrombie Age, is the idea of privileged frivolity. And basically what privileged frivolity means is that at the turn of the millennium, the teens were targeted, marketed, they were sold this idea, privileged frivolity, that's all about prioritizing this highly sexualized, aspirational consumer culture that's emphasizing what the world would, could, or should be if you have the proper consumption, if you buy the right things. And so the author has three basic interrelated dimensions to this term that he uses. So it's privilege, right? The embodiment of privilege, that is the taken for granted qualities of everyday life. No one in an Abercrombie ad has to struggle. That's not part of it. They're all privileged. And the author thinks it's mostly on the like class and consumerist aspects, like accrued capital, but also like identitarian, like white, abled, conventionally attractive, that also comes through in the A&F ads.
If you look at the way that people occupy their bodies in these beautiful Bruce Weber photographs, they're so effortlessly confident, right? Because these are people whose bodies are so worshipped and desired in our society that they don't even really have to think about how they look. They're just like, oh, haha, let me just take my top off and throw it over my shoulder into the water while I'm on this canoe.
Or I'm so attractive that I don't even need to wear formal clothes, right? Formal clothes, that's for people who give a shit
that's
about how they
uggos,
look.
right? Like
right.
Real hotties can wear soiled, ripped jeans and a falling apart t-shirt.
Yep. The second big point about privilege frivolity is just basically this idea that consumer culture informs and can transform identities, which is also closely related to privilege because it takes money. But think about any teen movie you have where you can have a makeover, you can take off your glasses and let your hair down, and you now have fundamentally a different identity, regardless of any kind of social structures or identitarian markers that are reinforced by society. No. You can buy your way to a new identity through the proper consumption.
Just like our president says that if you buy a degree from Trump University or buy a Trump steak, you too can be a billionaire and be a real estate baron.
Yeah, this author points out too how common it is in these 2000s teen movies for someone to undergo a makeover, right? Like all that's important is how naturally attractive you are. And assuming you make the important consumer choices afterwards, you can basically transcend class and social status by buying the right things. You know, everyone from like the girl they dress up in Clueless to I think 10 Things I Hate About You and Mean Girls, right? Katie Heron also goes through this transformation. What's important is what you buy. What you buy defines your look, which basically will rule everything else in your life.
And the third big tenet of this privilege frivolity is that what they're selling you is this lack of consequences. It's all wrapped up in this unyielding optimism of the better future. We see this in like teen movies. Things work out for the best, regardless of what you did wrong. And I know you might say teen movies are all trite. They're all going to have a happily ever after. But I think about some of those 80s teen movies that actually dealt with a lot more serious shit compared to the stuff that we have in the 90s. I'm thinking like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, movies like that. This idea of the lack of consequences is also intimately tied to class privilege and consumption, right? In reality, the upper classes don't face consequences or penalties for their shitty behavior.
Yeah, you can hang out with Jeffrey Epstein, no problem.
Yes! And you can still be the CEO of fucking A&F. And like, yeah, the short version of the privilege frivolity, what they're saying is, you're not the WASP Kennedy that died in World War II. You're the WASP Kennedy that did cocaine and died in a skiing accident. Well, maybe not that one, because in real life, there are consequences, unlike the advertisements. Maybe a better thing would be, you're the Kennedys that are just social media influencers now. They were evil, but like, those WASPs that built the American empire had some notion of service, right? They were gonna start the CIA and like, run this fucking thing.
Yeah, James Jesus Angleton was a poet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the key difference that Abercrombie and Fitch pitches to the public that we bought into so much was like, prior to this, if you wanted to sell like expensive clothes to teens, right? I think the idea behind marketing for Ralph Lauren or Calvin Klein was that like, yeah, you'll look good like at work or you'll look good sailing a boat, something difficult that you like actually had to try to do, or like in a job interview or something. And what's key to all of these photographs that Abercrombie and Fitch would take is that they were never doing anything of importance, right? Because you are not pitching someone a vision of like working hard and being rich. You are pitching someone on a vision of inheriting wealth and doing nothing with it. Nothing of substance at all.
They're literally just beautiful people in various states of undress who are in a field or on a beach, just running through the woods in a cabin. There's really nothing going on. They're not even necessarily engaged in leisure. Maybe the most they would do is paddle canoe.
Yes. I think my point here is that like, despite it being like a college brand, they are not studying.
When do they hit the books? When are they in the library?
Yeah, Abercrombie and Fitch University really fell in the U.S. News and World Report rankings after the entire class spent all semester frolicking in a field.
And the thing is, I think what they're marketing is it doesn't matter. You can literally like never go to class, never study, and it doesn't matter. You're going to work for your dad anyway one day, and he doesn't give a shit whether you finish school, right? And I think Ben is making fun of me with that joke because like what advertisement would show someone in class? And I think, I don't know, if you were to look at like a Campus Crew ad, I'm sure that they occasionally might have a book open in front of them or something, right? Like this is what's so crucially different about Abercrombie and Fitch is like the idea that you would have to care about dressing formally or apply yourself in any way or literally do anything other than like wrestling with your brother in the mud naked is a fucking waste of time because you are inheriting wealth and privilege. You don't have to try. None of this shit matters.
And it's crazy because they're telling you can buy your way into inherited wealth. It's big. You gotta spend money to make money.
Yeah. Buy this $40 t-shirt and you too can inherit millions.
And I find it so profoundly ironic because the original point of the brand was to like outfit people to go on safari, right? Which of course in itself is also a form of privilege frivolity.
But this is what I'm saying is the leisure thing, right? And this is, I think, also the difference maybe with the sort of WASP image that they created and maybe something that feels more accurate. But also, like I said, I'm not a WASP. And so maybe this is my own romanticized view of WASPs as an outsider. But right, it's like, I feel like when I think of WASPs, I think of people who are doing these Arctic expeditions, or even now I think of people who are like, oh, I'm an outdoor trail guide in Colorado or something, right? Like, even if they're living primarily off of inherited wealth, they're doing a thing. They're doing something, you know?
That's what I'm saying about that word frivolity is so funny because yes, going to the Arctic is frivolous, but it is actually like way less frivolous than wrestling in the mud or like riding around on a moped with your cousin. It's so funny that they've made a safari somehow like more serious and like having a higher work ethic than something else.
The safari is the Protestant work ethic, comparatively speaking.
Like I said, James Jesus Angleton was a poet, people.
Yeah, exactly. He did something. Writing poetry, that's for people who have to do stuff, you know. I've inherited wealth. I don't have to do anything.
He was a poet and he oversaw many executions in the CIA.
Well, that part they might still aspire to one day. You might be rolling your eyes at the idea of people putting work into an advertisement. It might sound stupid, but isn't that what like all of workwear is now? Like when I wear Carhartt, right? I'm implying that I do have a job, that I'm working on something. There's none of that with Abercrombie.
In the 2006 Salon article, the journalist finds that everyone, including the CEO, wear flip-flops around the office, and he shows up wearing khakis and brown shoes and a button-down. And someone actually offers him flip-flops so that he'll be more comfortable. So, right, in the quote-unquote campus of the Abercrombie headquarters, right, because that's what they called their headquarters, the campus, everyone wore flip-flops because we're just on vacation here. We're not doing any work whatsoever.
Yeah, the most impractical shoe type, right? You're not doing any kind of work in flip-flops. Unless you work at Abercrombie and Fitch, I guess, in like the graphic tee department.
Can I hit us with a Jeffries quote again? Let the man speak for himself. You know, we already said when he took over, he saw their demo as 60 to death. And he did exactly what we're saying, where Mike Jeffries said, leisure time isn't for 60-year-old retirees anymore. It's now for people born to rich parents of any age. That second half might not be part of the quote.
You know what I would have loved to see, and this just occurred to me, I would have loved to see an A&F magalog with someone cutting the head off a whale, hunting, carrying it back in their car on Cape Cod, hunting with a falcon in their dorm room at Harvard.
I think it is like especially telling of maybe the millennial outlook in this era where like wealth inequality is getting worse. It is like more clear to us that like the economy is rigged for people in the 1%. That we're like, do I aspire to be a Rockefeller? No, actually, because that's a stupid aspiration. What I aspire to be is the child of a Rockefeller.
Well, actually, Colettte, as I was researching this and like this privileged frivolity, I was thinking a lot about your book because you draw the boundaries of the Y2K from the dot-com bubble bursting to the Great Recession. And that's that period of like intense, exuberant optimism. And I was thinking like, yeah, a lot of these ads fall in that window. And of course, this insanely optimistic that we're laughing at how absurd it is. Of course, this is when it would land and then stop landing.
I also think that during this era, a lot more people could trick themselves into thinking that they had more wealth than they did. I mean, hell, it happened to my family. So I think, you know, you maybe had your people who they lived in Indiana or something, or hell, it could be, you know, somewhere in Connecticut too, you know, but they have the value of their McMansions going up and up. And it seems, you know, wow, we have so much extra money, our family, because our house is so highly valued. And wow, our stock portfolios reaching these highs we've never seen before, you know, because now we all have to have stock portfolios because we don't have retirement. And we all have to, if we can, give our kids some kind of college fund if it's possible, because the cost of college has gotten so insanely expensive. So I think that during the Y2K era, a lot more people could participate in this fantasy that they were Rockefeller heirs. Okay, maybe they didn't have $1 billion, but maybe they had a net worth of $1 million. Hey, this is great. This is going to last forever. And then for a lot of people, it just didn't. Some people it did, right? For some people, they had enough wealth outside of, for example, just their McMansion or like highly overvalued stocks that the losses really didn't matter too much. And then they were able to, once the stock market went up again and the housing market started doing well again, then they were able to do really well, right? But I think that Abercrombie and Fitch fits into the Y2K era because there seemed to me to be this idea that we're all in this together. We would all get to be rich now. And so we could all participate. Line goes up. So we could all participate in this fantasy of lack of consequences, of privileged frivolity. And then, of course, when the crash came, more or less, a lot of people got a wake-up call that, oh, actually, the rules do apply to me.
I mentioned this type of rich person who's also incapable or doesn't actually have to do anything with their time. We were so envious of this position that you see it coming up in a lot of media from the time. The author notes, Clueless, Cher fits this archetype, right? Someone who is just like rich and she can't drive, she's not good at school, and she just sort of like exists. And this is sort of like the idealized form. And it got me thinking about Legally Blonde as well, where like the entire premise of that movie is like, what if one of these privileged frivolity people actually had to apply themselves? And it turns out they're really good at it.
Which is why they deserve their wealth, actually.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows that, well, okay, I was going to say everyone knows that wealth makes you smart. Although one thing I will say is that LSAT prep is really expensive. So yeah, I mean, that shit, it costs like thousands to get like really good LSAT prep. So, you know.
This story kept making me think of George Bush because to me, he's a fail son who got elected president and like
elected.
Ben is putting air quotes around elected.
He's a fail son whose dad's friends got him the job of president.
Right. George H.W. Bush, he was a soldier, he ran the CIA or whatever. But George Bush has had a much more blessed life in the sense that it's like, okay, you're old enough, what do you want to do? Hey, you want to run the Texas Rangers? And be like, yeah, sure. Like this absolute life of privileged frivolity into the presidency, right? Like a legally blonde, legally Bush situation.
Well, and you can kind of see that with his personality. Like he was always sort of like, hey, isn't it crazy that I ended up here?
Truly, if you watch that documentary, Miss Me Yet, we had the director on this pod.
Oh, I love him. Yeah.
If you see the Miss Me Yet documentary by Chris Bell, George Bush looks like he had more fun being president than any other president. He is somehow always dancing. He's always finding these events to go dancing.
He smiled a lot. Like, I feel like he smiled in almost every picture. I don't really remember him very often looking dour, except maybe when he was reading My Pet Goat and getting the big news about 9/11.
You guys ever see those pictures of him and Jeb Bush naked wrestling in the back of a car?
No, I have not. Yeah, wow. That's crossover content. That is Magalog coded.
Thank God it's black and white. It's tasteful that way, you know?
Right. I just wanted to mention quickly that, like we said, none of these people are WASP New England's, which includes like Mike Jeffries, who we've already mentioned is like a gay man from California who was never a part of this cool scene, but always wanted. Bruce Weber, likewise, bisexual man, Jewish. The editor-in-chief of Quarterly is a Greek gay man. And so I call it artifice because I don't actually think there's like a real authentic continuity to some kind of real lifestyle that you were tapping into, right? This is all cooked up in the brain of like 3 or 4 people and doesn't actually exist in the way that they presented it. You know, there were cool kids, but certainly not maybe the privileged frivolity. I don't know how much those people were actually wearing Abercrombie & Fitch.
All right, yes, let's talk a little bit about sexuality because the look is very homoerotic.
I find this so fascinating. This has been something that's been on my brain for the last week, and I can't get over how profoundly ironic it is that, like, I find the 2000s to be like a very homophobic time.
Very homophobic.
And if you're listening, you may be rolling your eyes because you're like, well, certainly the 90s was more homophobic. And it's like, yes, true. But in 2008, California makes gay marriage illegal via some kind of like referendum, right? Like California, liberal ass California is going to democratically ban gay marriage in 2008.
And also by the late 90s, so in 1996, by the way, you have the triple cocktail treatment for HIV/AIDS. And this is a huge turn in the AIDS pandemic because it essentially allows people to continue to live their lives in relative health if they're able to afford and get treatment, whereas before it was a death sentence. And so I think that this also changes the tone of gay rights and takes it away only from, hey, we've got to stop homophobia only and stop the AIDS pandemic, but saying, hey, what else can we do? You know, can we do civil unions? Can we do more inclusion within the culture? By, I believe, late 90s, early 2000s, in certain states like Vermont, you were getting civil unions. And this, for younger listeners, this was a precursor to gay marriage, where you would be able to get a lot of the same legal right that married couples had. And so this was happening. And then in 2004, in the presidential election, Kerry versus the re-election of George W. Bush, the Bush campaign really campaigned on this wedge issue of, oh my God, there's going to be gay marriage spreading across America. And this tipped the election in Bush's favor because enough Americans freaked out. And there was just a lot of public homophobia during this era. Like, this was really the rise of gay as a pejorative. And you had really widespread homophobia in popular culture. So I'm thinking of, like, there's a movie called I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry that is sort of making...
Beautiful film. One of my favorite French films, you know.
Chuck et Larry. You know, sort of making fun of the idea of gay marriage at a time when it was still illegal. You barely could do it anywhere.
In that 2004 election, Massachusetts legalizes gay marriage. It's the first state in the union to do so in 2008. But 13 other states banned it via ballot initiative, thanks to Karl Rove, like using this as a way to get out the vote.
Yep.
Gay marriage was so unpopular, you could use it as a way to get people out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've sort of established the setting of the time, what I find so ironic about Abercrombie and Fitch in this era is how, like, profoundly homoerotic the look of their advertising and posturing was in this gay-phobic time. Like, it's wild that we used to say that Gap meant gay and proud, because Abercrombie and Fitch is like 1,000 times more gay and proud, or maybe not proud, than the gay and repressed than any other brand on the market. Like, you look at any Abercrombie and Fitch ad, and they were incredibly homoerotic and led mostly by, like, gay executives.
Right. We're talking like shirtless, very attractive, 6-pack, 8-pack abs, 18-year-olds playing touch football in a field.
Yeah. And I think, like, the key word is one that Colettte said earlier, which is voyeurism. Like, the homoeroticism isn't necessarily in how these male models interact with one another. The homoeroticism is how we are looking at them as photographer and viewer.
Right. Like, when you look at these Bruce Weber photographs, it's sort of like you've got your little binoculars and you're like, oh, what do I see here? Some Vero young men playing touch football? Interesting.
And it's funny that, like, even though all of the ads are of men and sexualized men, I do think that it still ends up speaking to the male gaze, like, more than the female gaze. Am I wrong about that? I just think that the way that they present the sex lines and, like, the cum gutters and, like, the pecs and torso, I always just found that, like, this was speaking more to, like, a homoerotic desire than what, like, a woman might be looking for in a man.
I remember in middle and high school, other girls would say, like, wow, the Abercrombie guys who stand around shirtless and wear Santa hats at greeting you at the door at the mall at the holidays. Oh, they're so hot. They're so hot. Or, oh, the guys on the bags are so hot. But yeah, I always found it almost a little sterile for my taste.
Not a single hair on any of their
Yeah, not
chests.
a single hair. They certainly weren't listening to Green Day or The Clash or something.
No, too cynical.
Yeah, too cynical. These are not cynical guys.
If you've seen Borat, if you remember the guys in the RV on Borat, I think about those guys all the time because I think they're so indicative of where a lot of, like, men were at in the 2000s. This absolutely, like, sexist, racist, homophobic attitude that a lot of people had. And if you look at those guys, they're dressed in, like, what looks to be Hollister clothes. They have, like, a polo on, a backwards hat, and, like, a button-down shirt. It's clothes that might have been offered at Abercrombie and Fitch, like, inspired by that look. And I just find that so profoundly ironic because they're talking to Borat about how, like, they would like to hang gay people in America. That's what we're trying to get done over here, right? And yet, the advertisements that they're responding to are so homoerotic.
Are women your slaves in Russia?
No. Do you have slaves here?
No slaves.
No slaves. It is a shame.
And Borat.
Big shame.
Big shame.
It would be better country if...
Yes,
Yeah,
it
but
would be a
Borat-
better country. We should have slaves.
Our country, the minorities actually have more power.
Anyone that is minority has the upper hand. We have the Jews. We have anybody that's against the mainstream.
It's amazing that we saw all of this imagery and it just never clocked to anyone that this might be gay or come from a photographer who was gay, an executive who was gay.
Not everyone, because like we saw in the documentary, gay teens clocked it immediately. Like queer
Right, yeah.
people clocked it immediately.
Yes, that's true. In fact, I was listening to like people talk about the Abercrombie and Fitch quarterly. It seemed like a lot of people who kept the copies were often like gay teens. But I think for most people, like the guys in the Borat RV, they were not clocking this. And so I just find it to be very strange 2000s concoction.
Well, maybe it's because, not to do, a triple crossover with my husband and his military culture podcast that you guys have been on, but think about how saturated military imagery is in American life. And the military is so gay. It's just buff, shirtless guys all sleeping in the same bedroom together, getting naked, showering together, and like learning to wrestle together, putting on costumes, like, or just think about, the popularity of football. Like it's just buff, attractive men just tackling each other. And I feel like there is so much of American masculinity that is already so gay that I feel like maybe that's why straight people didn't clock it.
Mm-hmm. I like that. The F actually stood for Finland. It was Abercrombie of Finland.
I mean, pretty much, yeah. No mustaches, though. That was definitely not allowed in the employee handbook.
Also, most of the Tom of Finland guys have jobs.
Right. They're plumbers, they're electricians.
Okay, so let's move on to the fall of Abercrombie. What eventually pushed Mike Jeffries out? What led to this company making $1 billion in sales, having to totally reinvent itself again? Well, the 2008 recession happens, which helps kill the optimism of the Y2K era. And I think you have to say it is tied up with the changing social mores around a whole bunch of issues. Whether that's body positivity, where people now want clothes for all body types and shapes, growing societal anti-racism, like the anti-Asian frat boy t-shirts are no longer socially acceptable. And as people have a kind of political rewiring throughout the early 2010s, this whole exclusivity that Abercrombie prided itself on really starts to rub people the wrong way. And Mike Jeffries, he rode that exclusivity train all the way to the end of the line, quoting the man himself again. Candidly, we go after the cool kids. We go after the attractive, all-American kid with a great attitude and a lot of friends. A lot of people don't belong in our clothes. And they can't belong. Are we exclusionary? Absolute. And I will just say that the Supreme Court would agree in Equal Employment Opportunity Commission versus Abercrombie and Fitch Stores Inc. 2015. They got sued all the way to the Supreme Court for not letting a Muslim American woman wear a hijab at work.
This is covered a lot by the White Hot documentary that's on Netflix. It's the primary focus of that documentary. But, in their handbooks, they have a lot of telling employee restrictions that I think they were given explicit instructions verbally to like only hire white people, or you're only allowed to like hire one non-white person. You couldn't have two, things like that. But then in the actual instructions, they had rules like not allowed to have dreadlock, not allowed to have a gold chain, which I fear is anti-Italian discrimination as someone who's had a gold chain since he was baptized. And when they were hiring non-white people, they were making them work in the back, folding clothes. And it's heartbreaking to hear these accounts from people who they're in high school. They idolize what Abercrombie is supposed to represent, which is like inclusion in white society. And they're like let go from their jobs because Mike Jeffries has done a blitz and has decided there's too many ethnic people working here. It's absolutely heartbreaking to watch. And they certainly had a vision of 1950s style, all white, blonde America that idolized a certain type of like American body. And I think it went all the way way, like throughout their entire corporate structure. We mentioned the graphic tees that they got in trouble for. I think the most famous one is the two Wongs can make it white. That's making it through, I think, a company that is like mostly white people. By the way, remember graphic tees? Remember those were like all the rage as a fashion item that you would buy? But yeah, it runs smack into the face of the culture of the 2010s. You know, we mentioned, first of all, this breaking of our like optimism that Colettte talks about in her book in 2008 once the financial crisis happens, but also into the more inclusive culture that I think we had in the 2010s versus the 2000s. And if you're someone who would like to say, hey, listen, they're a brand that should be able to market to just white elitist people.
First off, if you want to make that case, stop listening to this podcast.
Yeah, how did you find us? For one. But two, you should also know that, like, in addition to all of this exclusionary elitist stuff, the people that you're defending, people like Mike Jeffries, the alleged sex criminals we've been describing over the last hour, this is covered in a lot more detail by that BBC documentary, The Dark Side of Abercrombie, but just absolutely running like a sex trafficking ring on the male models who were hoping to work there, like taking their desire to have a modeling career and being forced to do sexual favors for middlemen on the way there. And, you know, so we've already talked about Les Wexner, the guy who basically enabled Jeffrey Epstein's entire career, and Bruce Weber, who's been accused of misconduct by dozens of models, which he denies. And Mike Jeffries, the CEO, who he would essentially have the models come to his house, ply them with drugs, have bodyguards there to intimidate them, and force them into having sex for him and his friends. And the guy that Mike Jeffries had doing his dirty work was this guy named Jim, who was the one who would tell the models what the deal was, right? And like coerce them into sex. Also force them to give him a blowjob. This guy, Jim, wore a snakeskin patch over his nose because his nose fell off, allegedly due to plastic surgery. But I'm thinking probably like cocaine also, allegedly. But it's like, you're a teenage boy, you're led into a mansion with the promise of a job, and you're forced into a room with bodyguards, made to do drugs, like not sure how to advocate for yourself. And these like disgusting 70-year-olds are sodomizing you and like using like a literal Bond villain to coerce you. It is the most fucking twisted, toxic, disgusting company reputation ever to imagine. The fact that like this company existed into the 2010s at all is crazy, considering how profoundly evil everyone involved was. And Mike Jeffries eventually does leave in 2014. He's arrested following that BBC documentary, so good for them. And he is awaiting trial for sex trafficking, although he's unable to stand trial because he now has Alzheimer's. So I found it funny. One of the golden parachutes in his contract was that A&F had to pay for all of his future legal fees involved in cases against him.
Yeah, smart thinking.
Yeah, part of his job, I think he argued in court.
The snakeskin patch is a little on the nose, as it were.
That's really something else, yeah.
Yeah, like, not only am I going to coerce all of these teens into having sex with me, but I'm also going to facilitate this by using this guy with a snakeskin patch over his nose? Jesus Christ.
To recap, what we are saying is, if you wanted to just yada 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 over Abercrombie and say, yeah, they're reflective of their times, of course it's insensitive, it was a different time, it was a different culture, what we are saying is, number one, no, they were leading, they are not necessarily reflective of it, they took a much more active role, and number two, it's not just the fucked up advertisements, it's not just the microaggression t-shirts, it is the fact that it is run by a cabal of sex criminals who did sex crimes. It's all bad. It should not still exist.
Well, they've reinvented themselves as a kind of general place to buy normal clothes for people in their 30s and 40s, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We thought we might just have a quick section here on the A&F Quarterly, just because Ben and I couldn't get our hands on it. Maybe in the future we'll do a fuller reading series from it. But they put out this magazine. Sometimes it was like 180 pages long. Although you could read this in about 3 minutes because it's all photos for the most part. Assuming you weren't gooning to it, you could finish it pretty quickly. Or maybe, you know, you could finish it pretty quickly either way. But they hired this intern, this guy Savas, to be the editor-in-chief at 23 years old. He was a young guy. And there's a great clip of him in that Abercrombie & Fitch White Hot documentary, which I'll put in here. He talks about when he knew the brand had gone bad because the bully in Spider-Man was wearing Abercrombie & Fitch. And that's not what the brand stood for. The brand stood for being nice to Peter Parker, the science nerd. But the magazine has been described as something of like a youth manual. So there was obviously a lot of photography of nude or semi-nude models. There was satirical advice columns.
And unsatirical advice columns. Like sincere advice on like how to stock a bar, and also sex advice. Like we've already talked about in this magazine that is marketed to teens, ? They had travel suggestions, they had pop culture reviews, and I just want to mention, they once brought on a philosopher. One Slavoj Žižek came on the 2003 Back to School The Sex issue. And this is the easiest one to find on the internet. I strongly recommend you find it yourself, especially if you can read in your head in Slavoj Žižek's iconic cokehead Slovenian voice. But it's like, okay, here is a magalog in America, a country without comprehensive sex education, called the Sex Ed issue. And we've brought on a philosopher. It even opens with them saying, "Dear Slavoj, enclosed, please find the images for our back to school issue. We've never had a philosopher write the text for our images before, so write what you like. We're looking for something that Karl Marx meets Groucho Marx thing you do so well. Thanks." And they have this gushing thing where they say, Slavoj is a man who'll tell you something about anything. His texts are already classics. Blah, 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 blah.
I'm curious how this connection got made, right? Do we know, was it Zizek reaching out to the Magalog? Was it the Magalog reaching out to Zizek? How exactly did this come to be?
They say in the Magalog that we tracked down Zizek during a whirlwind 3 days in London to get his input. And I just want to read one. Giordano, you're better at the impressions. Could you go to page 13 of the PDF and read this quote for me?
As we already know from Daphnis and Chloe, the late antiquity novel, there is nothing spontaneous about sex. One has to learn it. One has to be introduced to it.
Thanks, Slavoj. Very useful. I feel like I have gone through health class. I need to pick up a copy of the late antique novel Daphnis and Chloe, and then I'll be able to fuck.
It was tough doing a reading series from this. I thought it would be like an easy home run, but I'm like, all of this is just nonsense.
Like most things Slavoj Žižek produces.
The naked couple without a spectacled teacher would be reduced to two clumsy, ignorant, unable to perform the act.
Gave me some sniffs in there.
Right.
And yeah, I'll just add one last one. Like I said, we couldn't track these down, but the book that we read quotes some that just has incredible classist shit. There was an article called "Why Does the Mall Become So Annoying Around the Holidays?"
This was amazing.
Yeah. There's the lady who brings like a brown bag lunch.
This is so good. Christmas shopping advice. Go early to beat the freaks who go to the malls between Thanksgiving and New Year's. You wouldn't want to run into the bargain shopper who works as a librarian or a civil service worker who might bring a bagged lunch to the mall and spend free time sucking up your tax dollars with Medicare and Social Security payments.
God damn. Yeah. True quiet part out loud shit.
Right. So the college students who are running around the malls buying Christmas gifts are angry because a librarian or civil servant is sucking up their tax dollars.
Yeah. What an insane point of view this has, for sure. The freaks at the mall, like the people who bag their own lunches. Like...
Levels of privilege that are unimaginable.
Yeah, this Christmas one that Age of Abercrombie brought up a lot was interesting because it kind of told you the aspirational point of view you should hope for through the main character in this story, who's like a guy called part of the Emerson family. You know, and he's the guy who's getting the Jeep for Christmas. A lot of his college friends are coming back for Christmas from Europe, and they tell you, hey, for spring break, maybe don't go to Costa Rica this year, go to South Africa. This is sort of like the aspirational point of view they're trying to give you for the average shopper at Abercrombie and Fitch. This character, too, he mentions that his sister Whitney has a crush on a friend named Jonas Raleigh, who's a descendant of Sir Walter Raleigh, you know, the famous rich guy. And this guy...
Is that what we know Sir Walter Raleigh for? Just a rich guy? The man who defeated the Spanish Armada will not be disparaged in this way, Giordano.
Sorry. But yeah, in the vision they're trying to give you, of who shops at Abercrombie and Fitch. It's a guy whose sister has a crush on a descendant of Sir Walter Raleigh. And this is, I think, where you're right, Colettte, about them tipping their hand that they're actually kind of incorrect in their vision because they don't actually know what they're supposed to be seeing in reality. That this guy, Jonas Raleigh, is a professional polo player, folks. There's no way that is a real job. There are no there are leisure polo players. There is no one who is like making a living off of being a polo player.
Right. I mean, I know there is a bit of a polo scene in like the horse country of Virginia and Maryland, but Massachusetts, I don't know. But I kind of associate polo with more like the falconry of the Gulf states. Like I sort of see it as being in that league, where I think if they really wanted to hit it spot on, what they would have said is, this Raleigh guy is a college squash player or a college lacrosse player. I think that would have felt much more true to this fictional family that lives in Massachusetts.
Honestly, if they want to sell that vision, maybe they should start selling to like Gulf countries and have it be like the Bin Laden and Fitch organization or something. You're just going to live off inherited wealth, have a life of privileged frivolity.
I still can't get over the fact that this guy from the Emerson family, he really, really hates civil servants and librarians.
The idea that you would demonize civil servants and librarians is crazy.
It's because they're not marrying descendants of Sir Walter Raleigh. The best they can hope for is descendants of Ponce de Leon. That's the level of explorer descendant that they can get. No better.
Can we also talk about this fictional family? When I read about that, the first thing I thought of was, do you guys know about the Bailey family of Chuck Schumer?
Oh, yes.
So Chuck Schumer has this fake family that he claims in a book has guided his policies for decades. They're called the Bailey family, and they live in Long Island. So I wonder if the Bailey family and the Emerson family know each other.
Different sides of the political divide.
It's a good thing I didn't find this quarterly. I mean, I wasn't interested in sex in 2003, but if I had gotten a hold of one of these in 2007, I would have had like a cargo cult-like affection for it, I'm pretty sure. I remember the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition was like as close as I ever got, but had I got one of these, oh man, it would have been over for me for sure. There's way more nudity in there than I expected. I expected it to be like 1 or 2. It's like mostly softcore pornography.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about our echoes in the culture, and then we'll do our closing thoughts.
The echoes in the culture, I think that like this is American culture to most other countries, right? In the late 2000s, I remember going to Italy and these Italian kids were just chasing us on the beach and just yelling like any American words they knew, right? So they were like, a Spider-Man, a California, a Abercrombie, a Hollister, And it was so funny that like to them, Abercrombie and Fitch like is American culture. This concocted projection in Mike Jeffries' like unfulfilled social status mind is now just what American culture is. And it's funny that as much as it's gauche to kind of wear this stuff, or it has been for the last 15 years, this is still very popular, I think, like in Mexico. I swear when I go to Mexico, you see like a lot more people wearing clothes like this.
I've also seen a lot of people abroad, like all over the world, wearing, if not Abercrombie itself, wearing clothes that are very much styled after that Abercrombie look, right? Like ripped, distressed jeans, 2 polos with a prominent logo, etc.
So many brands jumped in, like after, they made $1 billion. Every other brand seemed to pivot towards that style of clothing, to the point where I almost had a hard time at the beginning of this episode differentiating it in my mind from like American Eagle, Aeropostale, Hollister. It's all just it became the same look, right, that they all copied. Ralph Lauren even started a more casual like rugby line to appeal to this type of teen. And one of the main echoes in the culture, as mentioned, is Jeffrey Epstein. What happened there, allegedly, is that Epstein provides Les Wexner with underage people, women to have sex with, the owner of Victoria's Secret and Limited Too.
Which, by the way, speaking of mall brands that have concerning histories of Victoria's Secret.
Mm-hmm. Epstein gets blackmail on Les Wexner and then is able to use that blackmail to basically get all of Les Wexner's money, including his like mansion that you always hear about whenever you hear about like Prince Andrew staying at Epstein's house. Like this is how Epstein got the money ability to cavort around with the Clintons in like high society is through Les Wexner. And Les Wexner became a billionaire because of the success of Abercrombie and Fitch. So one of the biggest echoes in the culture in terms of like how America is perceived overseas, what our dominant culture is here, and in like our folk figures like Jeffrey Epstein, you know?
That's not how I would describe Jeffrey Epstein. He's like a Bonnie and Clyde folk hero, Giordano. Jesus.
Not a folk hero. He's more like a Slenderman.
Oh,
yeah, he's a folk villain, not a folk hero.
Yeah.
Right. You can have folk villains.
Yeah, and like the actual noxious geopolitical effects of having this massive honeypot blackmailing ring run by who knows which intelligence service.
A lot of Hollywood actors, too, got their start as Abercrombie and Fitch models, including Tom Welling.
Jennifer Lawrence. I believe also Lindsay Lohan did some modeling there before she really broke big in the mid-2000s.
Channing Tatum, who obviously fits that mold very well. And Penn Badgley of Gossip Girl fame.
Oh, nice.
A lot of people from Sir, I also heard, got their start sort of working at the Abercrombie and Fitch. People from Vanderpump Rules. Okay.
Let's wrap up with some closing thoughts. I will go first. I really didn't love the Netflix White Hot documentary because it's from 2022, and it comes down with the pretty annoying pro-market capitalism message that diversity and inclusion are actually good for business. When you are exclusive like Abercrombie, you're hurting your own bottom line.
Which, by the way, they spoke too soon.
Yes!
I get really frustrated when people say, oh, well, capitalism has a liberal ideology, capitalism has a conservative ideology. I don't think it really has an ideology. Whatever sells, sells. So I'm skeptical that, inherently a more inclusive worldview will triumph. Maybe it will for a time, maybe because people got bored of looking at the all-white naked football fest that Abercrombie had to offer. And they said, oh, wow, hey, this is different. Companies that are showing models of different races and sizes and so on. And then maybe people got bored of that and said, okay, well, fine. I like Sydney Sweeney had good genes. Although I think the thing with that's interesting, this sort of much written about reactionary turn with the Sydney Sweeney good genes ad, which, I mean, come on. I know people are illiterate these days, but they have to know that that's a call to eugenics. And they're really just saying the quiet part out loud that Abercrombie and Fitch tried to broadcast with their marketing and their explicit rules for their hiring at their company. But yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that's interesting about now is that I don't think this quote unquote reactionary turn is as widely accepted as the ANF stuff was at the time. Like, it seems that obviously as we speak, a lot of important institutions are getting taken over by the right. There's no consent manufacturing. Whereas I think in the Y2K era, there is very much a kind of at least widespread acceptance of, well, okay, that's how it is, which I think is different than now.
No, exactly. You two both anticipated where I was going with this. We're like, yeah, the Netflix has the woke capitalism argument. What happens when the culture turns? I was thinking to myself, like, if you thought Sydney Sweeney has good genes and bad, wait until you hear Levi's new slogan, Lebensraum.
Yeah, this is why the Netflix doc is libbed up. I love that point. That it's just like, no, the exclusion is wrong because it's wrong, not because it's bad economic. Because, yeah, what happens when it's not bad economics again?
This is my final thought for this episode, but like, you gotta ask yourself, what is the floor and what is the ceiling for just how moral the fashion industry can be, given that it is an industry? It is not there to be morally good. It is there to sell you stuff. Like you said, Colettte, the ideology is profit. There may be better and worse ways of selling to us and our aspirations, but at the end of the day, it's about making money, and it's kind of an inherently evil industry. Like, we spent 2 hours talking. We haven't even mentioned sweatshops in Southeast Asia, the ecological devastation of fast fashion, body image issues and disordered eating that is related to advertising. So yeah, it's just evil. It's evil all the way down. Yeah. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism. So my call to action is go to thrift shops and also learn to sew. 2 episodes in a row now that I'm telling everyone to learn to sew.
And then I would also add to that, so there are these really small kind of heritage brands and makers. They're run by the same family for like 100 years, and they all have the shittiest website you've ever seen. And so there's a place where I buy shoes sometimes loafers made in Spain. And it's just made by this one family. And one time I placed an order and I got an email like a week later that was like, hey, we're on holiday for the rest of this summer. Is it okay if we send you your loafers in October? And I'm like, hey, totally cool. So there are these sort of artisanal makers of knitwear and leather and things like that. Usually they're in the US or Italy or England or Japan. I mean, they're all over the place, really. You'll find this stuff around the world with some research. So I would say that buying from these places, by the way, I said heritage brands, be careful, because that's also a lot of places that are not actually this use the phrase heritage brand to market themselves. But
Too late. I've already bought a Heritage Foundation t-shirt online while you were saying that.
Perfect. It'll go great with your Sydney Sweeney has great jeans.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great call to action for this episode. Learn to sew, buy from heritage brands, go thrifting. Don't buy into lifestyle brands. Don't think that like buying clothes is going to give you some sort of cultural capital associated with it. That's fucking stupid.
Also, the other thing is that now we're living in such an era of advanced postmodernism that signs and signifiers have become completely untethered from each other. So I'll see someone on the street wearing some outfit, right? Like I'll see some girl in like downtown Manhattan somewhere and she's wearing her little frilly socks and ballet flats and plaid skirt. And I'm like, I don't know if this person is a Nazi or a leftist or just apolitical or what's going on here. You know, I cannot parse what certain things are indicating these days.
Yeah, and I think that's a very nice setup for my closing thought, which is just I did a little gumshoe reporting for this episode. I went into an Abercrombie & Fitch and a Hollister in Manhattan, and you know what they sell now? I'll put the links in our episode description, and if you're watching this on YouTube, look at the screen right now. They sell like fake ironic vintage clothing, right? Like Budweiser jackets, Bush Light sweaters, like Looney Tune denim jackets. Like it's all meant to look like you got it at a thrift store in like 2019. It is disgusting. It's all like $150 too, right? If you want to get like a Budweiser jacket, it's like $150. And like I find it disgusting because I used to wear this stuff and I kind of still do sometimes, but I think like the fun of that was the irony, obviously, but it's like the thrill of the hunt at a thrift shop of like finding and sort of trying to buy into this authenticity that like a Ford jacket from the 80s. I have this Ford shirt that says like out of a job yet, keep buying foreign. It's a shirt that was very popular in our hometown in like the late 2000s in Windsor. And I feel like you could just buy that shirt at Hollister now, of all places. There's not a single like surf reference at Hollister anymore. It's all stuff that like a friend of the pod, Troop Hater, would wear, which is so funny because like we had a hipsters episode that Troop Hater was on. We talked about how hipster culture became the mainstream culture, right? Like that's the echoes in the culture. It's like we all just became hipsters. And like I think nowhere is stronger evidence of that being true than the fact that Abercrombie & Fitch today sells Budweiser jackets, right? Or sells NASCAR t-shirts.
Total cultural victory. They have salted the fields of the prepified grunge or whatever the hell we want to call Abercrombie & Fitch.
Yes. It is really like so over for streetwear, I fear. Like when Jerry Seinfeld did that streetwear photo shoot, that might have been like a good tip that it was over, but like the nail in the coffin for me was seeing the dozen Budweiser jackets at Abercrombie & Fitch, which like if somebody were to just destroy those a little more, like could look like they were given out at an American Legion in the 1980s or something as part of like a beer promotion. I find that so funny that the way that people always talked about Abercrombie is like we were selling to the cool kids. And it's like, well, is that what this looks like now? Like, is selling to the cool kids selling to like a dirtbag guy? That's now the Gen Z cool kid, like in the same way a Gen X cool kid might have been like that.
I don't think it's targeted at Gen Z. I think it's targeted for aged up millennials, Jordan.
Well, it makes sense. They got my ass. It's funny that we've gone from like a society wanting to be Lance Bass to like a society wanting to be Dan Humphrey. I guess that's good in a way, but you know, I think if you weren't a scenester and like you were, you know, you were part of the main culture, you really did want to fit in so much more in the 2000s. It was an era of fitting in, you know, post 9/11, don't ask any questions.
Yeah, again, no cynicism, no questions. We all have to fit in and play nude touch football.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, Mike Jeffries praised the millennials for being more conformist than his generation. as a virtue.
And so it's funny now that they sell sort of ironic clothing, very different mindset than like the preppy. And my friend Sam, who was also on that hipsters episode, thank you for shopping, she went into an Urban Outfitters and was telling me like all the clothes there were in the Abercrombie and Fitch style. Like you could buy camisoles and like the type of clothes that Abercrombie and Fitch would have sold in the 2000s. So they've completely flipped positions, those two brands. And I wonder if it's because everyone is trying to be ironic now.
I'm not sure if anyone's trying to be ironic at all. Like I heard somewhere that apparently teens referred to band t-shirts as like, oh, that's a Nirvana style t-shirt. Not this is a Nirvana band t-shirt representing the band Nirvana. This is a Nirvana style of t-shirt.
There are dozens of master's linguistics theses being written about that right now.
I guess I say it's ironic. That is in the sense that the majority of people in Brooklyn wearing the Budweiser jacket are like marketing managers or something, right? Like they're not longshoremen or something. Like,
are you trying to say they're not true fans of Budweiser? Okay, I think we got to wrap up.
Any closing thoughts from you?
I'm glad this era is over. I mean, it just was really...
You're here.
It was just really psychologically oppressive. I really hate the body fascism stuff, which, by the way, I write about in my book, Y2K, which came out earlier this year. I write about it, not really about Abercrombie. I'm writing about it in the context of being a teen fan of Vogue and kind of high fashion that I aspired to. But yeah, I just think that this idea that Abercrombie represented about the only acceptable body is this thin, straight, white, blonde, hairless, tanned body. It sucked and it did a lot of harm. And it really pisses me off when I see people trying to bring that back, because my attitude is go fuck yourself. I refuse to accept that coming back so it can give a new generation of people eating disorders like I had.
100%.
Yeah. If you look at the about for this podcast, it's like, this is the dumbest decade in Western history. And like, certainly the aesthetics of the body that were most prominent, like, yeah, we're just straight up fascist and exclusionary and like probably didn't even exist at all for even like 1% of people, whether you were too large or like not large enough or not white enough or not handsome enough. Like there were so many ways to be excluded from this.
Even just the stupidity of like, I had wavy hair and that was verboten, right? Like you can't have wavy hair. That's insane. I would wake up an hour early before I even had to be up to do my regular getting ready so I could wash my hair, blow dry my hair, and go through it with a straightening iron, because I used to have very long hair before I cut it as an adult. And this was like a generational rite of passage for a lot of girls my age. Just this wasting of hours and hours and hours of time trying to turn our curly or wavy hair into straight hair. Very stupid, right? Again, nothing wrong with straight hair or making your hair straight, but the idea that like, oh, you can't be seen with curly or wavy hair was just ridiculous. And it stole hours of my life. And I don't really want to see a culture that tells women and girls that that's what they have to do to be seen in public. I don't want to see that come back.
Yeah, I love the argument when people talk about capitalism and they're like, well, it's so good at getting people to do things. And it's like, yeah, it's good at exploiting our stupid desires to like fit in and conform.
The worst impulses of our nature: hedonism, conformity, insecurity. We'll spend a lot of money on these things.
But yeah, if you haven't bought Colette's book, I'll put a link in the description. You gotta buy it. Listen, you know it's good. Ben and I like it. We love it. And you probably love the 2000s aesthetics episode.
Yeah, it's a book of personal essays about coming of age between the years 1997 and ends in the year 2008. And it weaves together memoir. So it starts when I'm 9 and it ends when I'm 20. And it's both a sort of memoir and essays, but it also is theorizing various aspects of what is the Y2K era, what were these things that it embodied, what were these aspects that contributed to making the Y2K era what it was. Like I have an essay in there about body image. I have an essay about internet porn and kind of sex and sexuality and on MTV, where I talk about learning about sex from a Ludacris song, as well as my weird UU sex positive youth group. I've got an essay in there about body image and fashion and my eating disorder. I've got something in there about mansions and the housing crisis. I talk about the Iraq War, post 9/11 flag t-shirts and hats and all of the goodies you could buy. So yeah, I kind of cover my own life, culture, and then kind of the bigger story of what was happening in politics and history at that time. So I think it's very much of a piece with what you guys are doing on the show.
Absolutely. So much of it rhymes with how we talk about the decade, and like, you know, even just in this episode, like the McMansions being aspirational as well. Like if you like this pod, you'll love the book, and I highly recommend you check it out.
Thank you.
And as always, huge thank you to our guests. Thank you so much, Colettte, for coming on, bringing your expertise. This was awesome.
This was awesome. I'm so glad.
Yeah, our first fashion episode. It was great to have you on as a Sherpa. And thank you, listener, for listening. As always, please like, please subscribe.
Leave a review on Apple Podcasts, by the way. It's been at least a couple months, and if everybody listening to this on Apple would leave a review, I would never ask again. But it's not the case, and I would like you to do it, please. This is a personal plea.
Please like, subscribe, write a comment, and as Renee said, write us an Apple review. Check out the Patreon. We got 10 episodes up there now. Lots of fun stuff. The Troy episode's a favorite of mine. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is a great one if you want some more like classics content that's up there.
And we're cooking up our 100th episode.
Oh, yes.
So be on alert for that. That'll be a big event. Mm-hmm. We're going to have handsome men on the street inviting you to listen to the 100th episode. Handsome shirtless men. The Shuffle Bodies, we call them. All right. See you later.
All right. That's all I got for you. Ciao, ciao.
Peace.